Hey guys, so welcome back to episode 4 of our podcast, She Said What, where the four of us discuss the modern landscape as women. So today we're going to be delving into how media traditionally portrayed women and how it's changing in recent times.
Okay, so here's the thing, right? We spend so much time watching TV and so much time just being surrounded and engulfed in media that whatever we see and whatever the media shows us, it genuinely does affect our perception of reality. And I think the media in general, or traditionally, at least like 10 years ago, has been very patriarchal. So if we're seeing like 90% of lead roles or 90% of like heroes that way being men, then we think that men belong in those places. And I think that in general that affects women and their mental health and their perception and their goals for themselves so negatively and so deeply.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the thing is that media plays a huge role in like influencing the biases or the ideologies of kids. Babies are not born with stereotypes. They aren't inbuilt in them. They're taught to them by these various influences, be it parents, be it teachers, and now increasingly media. It has an enormous influence on a child's psychology and the way they look at the world. We spend so many hours these days on media. We watch TV, newspaper, print media, and now with like Netflix and Amazon Prime, I'm sure all of us, our screen times are like 9 hours plus. And so that's why it's so crucial to actually watch what's been put on media because, like I said, I think people just underestimate the power and the influence of media.
Yeah, I mean that does make a lot of sense. I agree with what you guys are saying, but let's get into like how exactly does the media portray women, right? So if we look at like advertisements and things like that, right? I remember even in like school in like our IB English class, we did this advertisement for like got milk or something, right? And in that, like I forget who it was, but there was this like really famous actress who was in the poster, and like they quite like sexualize the advertisement. And it's not just with that, right? I feel like with a lot of advertisements in general, whenever they use like a woman, it's either to portray her in like a very like family setting, very maternal feel, or it's like kind of like sexualized. And I don't know if that's like a common trend that you guys have also observed, but yeah, I think that's something that's like been there quite frequently in our past.
Exactly. I think so many times, like in the media, women are just equated to their bodies. Like they're equated to their bodies and they don't really have a role outside of being like the wife of the main character or the sister or the mother. Like they aren't the main character. Their role in the movie is their relation to the main character. And that just I feel like in society, when your image of women is being reinforced as a supporting character, that's the message that's sent to everyone, and everyone in society will think that women have lesser value, and that is what is influencing our perception, and we're not educating women about their rights and about what they can be. Like, where are we motivating them, where are we inspiring them?
Exactly. And like adding on to you, Inika, like there's so many times when like women are just appreciated for how they look, like what you said, and how they like maintain their bodies and stuff like that. Like there's a lot of pressure in terms of media on like how women present themselves, how they hold themselves, and there's always like a sexual appeal attached to it. Like subconsciously, it's been there forever. And like yeah.
I think there are like a couple different ways that we kind of associate women and how they're kind of portrayed in media. Like the stereotypes that are prevalent in advertising specifically. The first is the whole division of labor and how women have a more their place is at home and they're more for their domestic needs. The second is that women are dependent on men. Women are dependent both financially as well as maybe for like physical support and like to protect them. They're seen as the more like, I don't know how to explain this, but more like men are more dominant in some ways. And that's what like the same thing is that women can't make their own decisions as such. And then the third thing is that like we talked about, women are used as a sex object is used to increase the appeal of the product. And all four of these stereotypes have been ingrained in us through the media.
But in addition to impacting women, I feel like it's also impacting men. Like if you look at it, like the entire trend of like having like the woman stay at home and the man like go be the breadwinner, that sort of like changed the narrative. And like it's it's harder to like normalize the woman being the working one and the man being a stay at home dad.
I understand what you're saying. Like, their ambition is only seen as acceptable for men, and for women it just becomes such an undesirable quality. Like for us, for women, we're seen as bossy and we're seen as like rude, and but men are seen as like dominant and as taking control and as leaders. And it's just that we don't see women in STEM fields, we don't see women as CEOs. And if we're not seeing women in the places that we want to be, our hopes won't reach that high. We don't see ourselves as assertive. And in so many movies, right, like the main character, if somehow the main character is a woman, then the desirable qualities in her will be like soft and gentle and loving. And the girl who's like ambitious and wants to get somewhere and has goals and works towards getting them, she's seen as like the antagonist in the movie. And those characteristics are shown as like undesirable. And if you possess those, no one want to be with you, no one want to be friends with you. You're just like outcasted and shunned. But why is that?
Yeah, and the thing is that these qualities, I think, is prevalent across different types of media too. I mean, talk about newspaper articles and things. I think I'd actually mentioned in the first episode itself, but when you talk about like female leaders, the characteristics that are kind of emphasized is the fact that she's a woman, is the fact that, oh, she has a family and she's managing to do the work-life balance so well, and how she's handling her kids' times. But if you talk about like a male leader, no, you will not talk about their home, you won't talk about their wife and their kids. You're going to talk about how they're, good leader, their intelligence, their leadership capabilities. You're not going to emphasize on their kind of domestic life at all. It's not brought into light at all. And so I think there's such a big difference in that. And I don't understand why the focus is on the gender. Why the focus is that, oh yeah, she's a good female leader. Why is the word female even there? Why can't it just be she's a good leader, or he or she is a good leader, period? That's it.
Yeah, and a lot of like I'm adding on to that, like a lot of like news tabloids and stuff, like arguably most of it is about like women's personal life and about who they broke up with, which club they were spotted at and stuff like that. It's literally mostly about that. And like when we read stuff about men, we see a lot of stuff about their careers and what they're doing, etc. So that literally reflects the difference in how they're represented and how media in a way forms the opinion in the minds of the readers, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Like I agree with you completely, Krisha. A lot about their personal lives, like no one talks about their success in their career or things like that. But when it comes to men, like oftentimes the media does only talk about like, oh, their stock went up by this much and like they've become like the first millionaire, like something like that. It's always about like their career. I mean, media just generally focuses on like the gender, I guess. Like you just, when it comes to a woman, talk about their personal life. When it comes to a man, talk about their career. And like that sort of has transitioned into like movies as well. Like when you see in movies and things like that, you generally, the films with a male protagonist and a female love interest do well. Like that's just how like commercial films are working nowadays. But like obviously things are changing. I'm not saying that it's like still like that. Things are changing, but oftentimes we see women as like a supporting role, like either they're the antagonist or like they are the love interest, and they just have like a very supporting role. They're never like a predominant figure in movies and things like that. Have you guys observed that too?
Exactly, and I'm not even kidding. Like, there's every short movie that has like this one girl who literally has no role other than just being like the sexual interest or like the hot girl that every guy wants to be with. Again, this is like highly influencing how we look at women, and it's demeaning the role. You know what I mean? It just seems to be a side role or like a minor role.
Exactly, and adding on to that, there's such a culture of like victimizing women to present men as their saviors. Like there's such a male savior complex, and you present the woman as the damsel in distress to make the man look better. Like, why can't we save ourselves? Why isn't there a movie about that? Why do we need someone else to save us? Like, none of the women that I know personally has that's happened. Like, I don't see that happening. It's just how it's portrayed in media. So that's obviously warping our perception of reality. And another thing that I want to go into is that media doesn't really represent reality well, you know? Like, we see white people, we see white women in media, but like even in American films, where is the African American representation? Where is the Asian American representation? Like, we want to see media better represent reality. We want to see us on our screens, you know?
Yeah, Anika, preach, Anika, go for it. No, but seriously, I think that there are two kind of aspects you have to look at. One is the quantity, the number of women who are put in like leader roles or as such in TV shows or movies in specific. That has definitely always been, there's always been a difference in terms of that. The scale has always been tipped in the men's favor. But I think as time is going on, that aspect can increase, and it is increasing. But the second is the quality, and more of in terms of how they are presented, not that the fact they're presented, but just how they're presented. I think that still needs a lot of change, because that's the main aspect that's actually influencing us. Those stereotypes, we need to break them down. These constructs have to be broken down, and it has to be done from like the grassroots level, from younger kids. Because like I mentioned, us, like the young kids, they are the ones who we need to put the most focus on, and it's their mindset that needs to not have a bias in it from the start, right? So when you talk about a lot of these production companies or studios, for example, take Marvel Studios, they've done a really incredible job, right? When you talk about the number of female leaders versus the male leaders, it's almost coming to an equal. And I think if a lot of other companies kind of follow their narrative and do this, it can really make a big change.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I feel like the more and more you represent women in like protagonist roles, very strong, dominant roles, the more that'll get imbibed in like the younger generation, like they will be able to see like, oh, I'm a girl and I see like a leading woman on screen and she's shown as like a powerful woman, not some kind of like damsel in distress. That sort of empowers the youth, I feel. And like, yeah, Marvel has done that. And if you look at it, change is happening in like a lot of industries, right? Obviously, there's still a lot to change, but I mean, if you look at it in Bollywood, this is quite controversial, I guess, because things are not changing as quickly as they should be. But if you look at Razi, right, like Razi, Alia Bhatt was a central character there. The film was surrounding her, and she didn't need like a love interest. Like it was about her and like her journey. Like Vicky Kaushal, her husband or whatever, was merely just a supporting role, and I kind of liked that dynamic as a whole. I feel like we should be seeing more of that in media.
Exactly. And like now talking about like foreign films and like stuff like that, I feel like representation has definitely increased, like for sure. A lot of roles are being created, not just like sexual, but like real and like inspirational roles are being introduced into films, like giving a really good like position for women to just put themselves out there and be, represent what they're good at, and like be really raw and like real. This is actually changing how women are now, and it's kind of empowering how we look at women.
Yeah, and that I do acknowledge that a lot of change is happening, but that being said, I still think that there's like a lot of change that is needed, right? Like if you look at TV shows and things like that, like game shows, for example, right? Like Deal or No Deal, right? You'll always have like attractive women as like sidekicks or whatever, just for like visual appeal, if that makes sense. And again, that just ties back to the point of like women being used as just like sexual figures and nothing beyond that. Like they don't have any role, they're not like serving any purpose in these game shows. They're just there for like visual appeal. And again, I think Inika brought this up, but like stereotyping, I feel like that's also like very, very like harmful, I guess. Like if you see like in the past, like whatever, like Big Bang Theory or things like that, like you'll always see like the Indian character will always be talking in a really like funny Indian accent, or we're talking about like curry, and like he'll be really smart, he or she will be really smart and things like that. And if you look at like Southeast Asians, they're like very good at math and like they talk in like a very, very racist accent. And if you see blondes, like they're just dumb. And all of these stereotypes, I feel, are like also very, very harmful. So like even if women are portrayed as like central characters or things like that, the stereotype also like plays a role in it. So I feel like in addition to having more women in media portrayed as like dominant, we should also look into like breaking down those stereotypes, because I feel like those are also really harmful.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing is that I feel like there's a lot of double standards in terms of how men versus women need to be portrayed, and like in terms of their appearance, for example. So if you take a lot of these like take movies and TV shows and things, a woman needs to be wearing like proper prim clothes. She needs to have like a full face of makeup, and she needs to, have her hair done curled always or like straightened. Versus a man, he can just kind of hobble out there with like a beard and like scruffy hair, and still he'll be still seen the same way. They won't like if a woman is not, properly dressed, people will just assume and associate that with her character not being as powerful, not being as dominant. But the same standards are not held for, not like considered for men, and I think that's really, really unfair.
Yeah, and in terms of like men also, right? Like obviously that's really unfair to women, but if you look at it for men also, they're sort of just like creating a stigma around like men taking care of their appearance, men using makeup or things like that. Like why is that like not a norm? Like why is it always like, okay, makeup is for women, it's not for it's not for men? Like these, all of these like gender roles in media, I feel are obviously very harmful to women. I'm not trying to like undermine that, but it's also harmful for men. Like when you see like a man taking care of his appearance, or like having a good skincare routine, or like using makeup just to touch up his appearance, using concealer, things like that, they're called very derogatory things. And I feel like, I don't know, these gender roles are very harmful to like men and women.
Exactly. Like, why can a cisgender heterosexual man not be allowed to groom himself? Like, so many of my friends also, every time someone's like taking care of their appearance, like putting time into their hair, into what clothes they wear, they assume that they must be a member of the LGBTQ community, or like just taking care of yourself to such a great extent is seen as so emasculating.
Exactly, Inika, I agree with you. Like you can't like in our society it's sad, but like you can't see a cisgender heterosexual man take care of his appearance without being called like a very derogatory like word, right? Like, and it's like that's one extreme of it. But if you look at it, even women can't be seen as like a, they want things that men want. Does that make sense? Like, I'm trying to euphemize this as much as possible, but if you see like a man who gets with like a lot of women, you're like, oh, he's like such a player, like it's have very positive connotations of things like that. But if you see like a woman who's been with like a lot of men, they get called very, very derogatory words. So like people have like stigmatized women talking about like things like that. Do you get what I mean?
Exactly. Like for a man to like be with a lot of people, it's fine. Like it's seen as cool. It's a positive attribute. But then when a woman does the same thing, or like if she's been with more men than she can count on one hand, you slut shame her. Like everyone slut shames her, and I don't get that. But like another thing I want to add is that thankfully this has been changing. The rate of change is not optimal, but it has been changing. Like shows like Never Have I Ever, we see a brown girl who's doing well in school and is very, very sex positive, and I really like that because not every single brown girl just studies all the time, and there's so much representation that's increasing now, and I feel like people are seeing the need to explore the different facets of people, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, it's definitely changing a lot, and it's changing across demographic. It's changing across different age groups. Take it from like even young kids or teens, for example, movies like Divergent or Hunger Games, where the woman is the forefront. She's like the warrior role. Or honestly, though the change is not only been limited to our generation. I have to admit that like older shows such as or like movies such as like Thelma and Louise, which portray two female protagonists, they've change has come, but like we keep saying, the fact is that maybe not enough change has come, and while we're moving in the right direction, the speed of our movement needs to be picked up.
Yeah, Risha, I do agree with you. I do think that like we have to acknowledge that like things are changing. Obviously, it should be changing a lot faster. But what's going faster is our Zoom call right now because we're very chindi and we only have a 40-minute Zoom call, and that Zoom call is ending right now. So that means we need to wrap up our episode right now. We hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you're listening to this on Spotify, just text us on Instagram or any of our social media regarding your thoughts about the situation. Or if you're listening to this on Instagram itself, just leave us a comment in the comment section below and we'll reply to you. I'm not gonna say keep vibing again, guys. I don't know, somebody else wrap it up.
Keep vibing.
Oh my god, you!